Shots fired. An all-out legal war has started between Panini and Fanatics. The winner and loser might surprise you.
I'm feeling good. Getting better. Feeling good. I can't let it go. I'm feeling good. 'Cause I never say never.
Hello, and here we go. Welcome to another episode of The Geoff Wilson Show. Can't we all just get along? No. We're well past that point now that Panini and Fanatics have filed massive lawsuits against each other. Many millions are about to be spent on a huge legal battle that could drag out for years. But who will the winner and loser be? I worry the loser will be collectors. The escalating fight between Panini and Fanatics will be at the expense of collectors in many ways. We've already seen Panini and Fanatics sign top athletes into exclusive autograph deals to keep their autographs out of the other company's products. And it's not good for collectors when Bryce Young and Victor Wembanyama can't sign Panini cards and Arch Manning can't sign Topps cards, which appears to be the case. If these companies continue to shoot at each other through tactics like these, collectors will be caught in the crossfire. The winner, though, might actually be the growth of the hobby. This high-profile court battle is already catching widespread media attention with big stories in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and more. The fact two heavyweights care to battle it out like this proves the market potential of the sports card industry. There are billions of dollars on the line here, and the world will soon understand just how important the future of sports cards really is. My personal wish is that they settle and that Fanatics acquires Panini or at least their licenses and brands. That, I believe, would be the best for collectors and the hobby overall. So Ben, thanks for joining me today. We got a lot to break down here. I want to break down these lawsuits and predict where all of this is going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to be here. Of all of the topics that it could possibly be, I'm glad that I'm here for this one. Probably the biggest thing that we're going to see this year. This might be the biggest story in the hobby for a really, 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 really long time, right?
It might be. I hope it's not a really, really long time. I think if it's a really, really long time, as I said, it's going to hold the hobby back in some ways.
Yeah.
It will hold the hobby back. It will, I hope this can get figured out and settled, but the chances of that happening, I don't know.
Exactly. So what we need to do first is sort of unpack the series of events here.
Yeah.
What we do have to establish is that there are multiple lawsuits as part of this. There's the previous one with Panini suing Fanatics over poaching some of their employees.
Yep.
That's really not what we're going to necessarily cover today. It's more of the antitrust lawsuits that are going on. So why don't you start, for everybody listening here, start to unpack this series of events and the two lawsuits that we really want to focus on right now.
Yeah. First of all, I'm not an attorney, but I do actually geek out on legal stuff sometimes. So I actually think I understand this stuff pretty well. I have obviously read the opinions of folks like Paul Lesko on Twitter, the various media articles from places like the Wall Street Journal to get up to speed. And I've looked at the lawsuits. So I think I have a decent understanding. But this isn't like legal precise what I'm about to say. But all of that said, so Panini started this by filing the antitrust lawsuit against Fanatics. And Panini claimed that Fanatics violated antitrust laws, that Fanatics essentially was operating a monopoly, and that they also, in addition, interfered with Panini's business, that they disparaged Panini to industry partners. The fact that Fanatics got a 20-year exclusive deal with the leagues is anti-competition, which, gets into the antitrust stuff.
Yeah.
That Fanatics locked out their competitors, and that Fanatics is running a pressure campaign against Panini. And that includes things like Fanatics investing in Panini's own printer, their own manufacturer, and doing different things like that to, create complications for Panini's business. Some of these exclusive autograph deals to keep people from signing Panini's products. These were all things that Panini alleged were part of their antitrust complaint against Fanatics.
Yeah. So just to unpack some of that immediately, obviously the original thought from a lot of people is sort of pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah.
Right?
Me as well. We'll talk about that.
Panini sort of had the monopoly for a little while. They came in, disrupted Topps and Upper Deck. Now it's happening to them, and it's no longer fun what are your initial thoughts on Panini's lawsuit against Fanatics?
It was interesting. So yeah, well, I want to talk more about that. It was interesting. Panini put out a press statement after filing the lawsuit. Panini's entire press statement didn't really mention the lawsuit at all, other than the headline of the press statement, which is, Panini's, why Panini filed the antitrust, or Panini's response to the antitrust, or something of that nature. But the rest of the whole press release was all about how Panini had brought innovation to the space. It was really a Panini is awesome, and the hobby has gotten better as a result of Panini. Not addressing the specifics of the lawsuit. It was really more of kind of a PR, like Panini's really good and the hobby should want us and not want Fanatics. And Panini pointed things out like they were the first manufacturer to support breaking, which that's a big deal. I'll give Panini that. Like they have been breaker friendly. They have been supportive of breaking. Breaking in many ways has revolutionized the hobby. Sure. Not everybody likes it. It has some issues, but there has been a lot of positives to the growth of the hobby on the back of breaking. And Panini has been a big part of that support of breaking.
Right. Breaking isn't new. I know a lot of people that are new to the hobby think that breaking certainly has exploded in popularity. Breaking has been going on for decades. I do think it's fair that Panini could sort of take ownership of embracing that. Has been around for a long time, but I think it's fair to say that among the manufacturers, Panini has embraced it the most until Fanatics.
Right. Fanatics is obviously coming into that. So Fanatics is going all in.
I'll give them that point. Yeah. What else did they talk about?
They said Panini patted themselves on the back for being the first with digital cards, the first with blockchain and NFT cards, which they were. It wasn't necessarily the best implementation of it, but they were forward thinking there. Yeah. Now, the movement around digital and blockchain and NFTs seems to have cooled recently. I don't know how big of a deal that is, but you know what? Good for them to have been innovative and to be the first out there to try to do things in the digital realm. Like, good for them for sure. They also said that they were the first group that took sports cards truly global. They specifically mentioned China as an area where they really helped grow the sports card market. One thing they didn't mention that I actually felt like they should have mentioned, because if I think about Panini's era with sports cards, the thing that I actually give Panini the most credit for, the thing that I think that they were most impactful for, was creating some absolutely amazing, iconic card designs and some amazing sets. I mean, Prism has become absolutely iconic and just, everyone loves it. It's national treasures, flawless. Some of these, and then even some other, I know, like you love Noir. That's a cool set. Like they've created some great products. The difference in inserts too. I think most people will say that Panini has done a much, much better job specifically with inserts than Topps. Topps has some iconic stuff, from the 90s, but Downtown, Kaboom, Color Blast, 100%.
They're all Panini, but
I agree. No, that's been revolutionary. Well, I shouldn't say it's not new, because it was that way back in the 90s as well, but Panini really revived that. And Topps hadn't.
The rise of parallels, obviously, for better or for worse.
For better or for worse.
I do want to get your take on that, in the sense of, we have to give them credit for building up parallels, but do we also sort of have to give them credit for killing parallels?
Oh, there's a lot Panini's done wrong.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Like, there's a lot of things I feel like Panini could have done a better job at. I mean, one of the sets that I would have classified as one of my favorite sets a few years ago was Select, and everyone who's been watching the Sports Card Investor channel know I love Select. I invest a lot of money in Select, and then Panini turns it into a retail product. Has 5 different sets now within the set, has 100 zillion parallels, just totally watered down the product. And
Trevor Lawrence has all these one of ones, it's
like 60 plus one of ones. All the reasons why I love Select in the past have, unfortunately, most of those have kind of died off here in the last couple of years. So, I mean, there's definitely things that I don't love about it, but I'm just making the point that if I were Panini and putting out a press release that's patting myself on the back for all of the innovation I brought to the sports card hobby, I actually would have pointed out all of the, great new sets and designs and inserts and all these things, because I actually feel like that's been one of their most impactful contributions.
Yeah.
But none of that really matters. And that's the thing. That was the interesting thing about the press release, is that that's all fine and good, but that's just that from a legal standpoint, that doesn't matter. Like it doesn't, none of that really matters.
Right.
What matters is you have now sued Fanatics and you're claiming that they are both cutting out competition and doing something bad. You have to
Exactly.
You have to show both. Like cutting out competition, people are allowed to do that, but cutting out competition that is bad for the market and that you've done bad acts to create, a bad situation for the market that's not consumer friendly. That's what they have to prove. None of these things about Panini's background prove any of that. That there's a whole nother element there that's got to be proved. And we'll talk about that because I do. Yes, the pot calling the kettle black was my very first reaction when I saw they filed the lawsuit.
Yeah.
It was, how in the world are you going to sue Fanatics and say that it's anti-competitive for Fanatics to get exclusive licenses for the next 20 years when you have had exclusive licenses for the last 10 plus years? Like, how are you going to do that? Panini has had exclusive licenses for football and for basketball for 10 plus years now. And they have them still for another 3 years, 2 or 3 years. So then how are you pointing at Fanatics getting them for 20 years and saying somehow that is, monopolistic and anti-competitive?
Yeah.
While Panini's own CEO argued, and there's documentation of
Fanatics
this.
is the future.
Well, not only that, but Panini's CEO argued many years ago for the benefits of exclusive licenses and why licenses needed to be exclusive. He said it is important for the sports leagues to award exclusive licenses because it allows the company who gets that license the protection of knowing that they have a long-term relationship, which then allows them to invest more into innovation. So he touted the need for exclusive licenses. So how does your own CEO tout the need for exclusive licenses and you have exclusive licenses for 10 plus years, and then you're suing a competitor because they're getting the exclusive licenses in the future? That is the one thing that just like, to me, that's like the first bar you got to cross from a logical standpoint. And I can't get past that bar. Yeah. Now, whether the courts will get past that bar, I don't know. And there's more elements to this as well. Like Panini's claiming that Fanatics is being antagonistic. I think Fanatics probably is being antagonistic in some ways.
Of course, that's how this works.
I think they probably are, and we'll talk about that. But that is how. I mean, it's business, right?
Yeah.
And it's not kind and friendly business. I mean, it is in some ways, aggressive, very aggressive business. Michael Rubin has a reputation for being very aggressive. Look at how Fanatics just took over the apparel industry.
Yep.
And pushed many people out. It was very aggressive, but it's also business. Just because it's very aggressive doesn't mean that it's illegal and that somebody did something that is wrong from a legal standpoint. And to me, I just can't see, like if I'm a juror listening to this case, I don't like the 100 plus pages of detailed arguments in these legal documents. I really don't need to go past page 1 because to me, page 1 is, wait a minute, Panini, you had the exclusive licenses for 10 plus years and you got them for another few. And now you're saying, and your CEO talked about the virtues of getting exclusive licenses. And now you're suing a competitor because they got exclusive licenses for 20 years. That just, to me, is like an automatic stop. Yeah. Like nothing else that from that page forward, to me, I just couldn't get over that fact. And again, I'm not saying that Fanatics hasn't done things that have been aggressive towards Panini. I'm sure they have, but like that to me is just such a kind of a stop point.
It seemed like Panini also missed the mark in some parts on this lawsuit, talking about the exclusive licenses, calling some of these cards pajama cards. Well, you put out unlicensed baseball cards every single year. You're dunking on your own product. There's been speculation that they're opening themselves up to additional lawsuits down the line, basically saying that Fanatics shouldn't be allowed to acquire some of the company that helps manufacture the cards because that will hurt the product. And they're, high-end cards are supposed to arrive in mint condition. We know that's not the case. So you're opening yourself up for that. And in general, again, pot calling the kettle black. It was okay to have a monopoly 10 years ago on this. Now it's not so fun. They talked about Fanatics acquiring these licenses in secret. What are they supposed to do? Put up a billboard How is that supposed to work?
Well,
some of that stuff seems silly.
I mean, I understand that point from Panini's lawsuit because in the past, these licenses have gone out to bid. In the past, like when the Major League Baseball license or the NFL license or NBA license comes up for renewal, there's an actual bidding process. There's Upper Deck puts in an offer, Panini puts in an offer, Topps puts in an offer, whatever other card manufacturers are around at that moment. This is historically in the past. They're putting in offers. And this was done very much clandestine, right? Between Mark Rubin or Michael Rubin rather, and the sports leagues. It surprised Panini. Panini found out in the media that this had happened. And can you imagine? I understand why Panini's pissed.
Absolutely.
If I were the CEO of Panini, and I found out in the media that the sports leagues had awarded 20-year licenses to Fanatics, and they weren't even up for bid or renewal conversation, and I had no idea any of that was going on, and I had been a good partner to the sports leagues for 10 plus years. Yeah. And all of a sudden, I'm finding out in a newspaper article that they've been awarded, and this whole thing was all done behind the scenes.
And it wasn't just one license, too.
It
was all of them.
All
right?
together.
Yeah. It's not like they could keep football or keep basketball or something like that. You're losing a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, don't forget, Fanatics also took baseball from Topps. Now, we don't think about that today because then Fanatics acquired Topps. But there was a minute in time where Topps was enemy number one with Fanatics as well, right? So, and I want to talk more about that later, too, because obviously the approach that Topps and Panini took as a result of this whole thing, totally different. And I think that's interesting to talk about. But I would have been wicked pissed if I would have felt like I got sucker punched if I was the CEO of Panini. Yeah. I get that feeling, but that doesn't mean that Fanatics necessarily did anything wrong, right? It means it's how they negotiated, it's how the deals went down, it's how relationships were leveraged. It doesn't mean that as just because you're the incumbent with the licenses, you don't necessarily have a legal right to there being any type of open bid process and structured process where you can submit a bid and go into some competitive bid process. The leagues could choose to do it that way, or they could just choose to award the licenses to somebody. It's their own business. They can do whatever they want with their own business.
And clearly the offer from Fanatics was so overwhelming to them. You know, we know that the Players Association and the leagues are going to be getting a bigger cut of this, and it's incentivized them doing more with marketing and pushing the product at games and things like that. If Fanatics' offer was so overwhelmingly good to them, I can sort of understand why maybe you don't even need to bring Panini to the table, but absolutely if you're Panini, you're upset.
Yeah.
You just got dunked on. The rug was pulled out from under you. You really didn't have a chance to recover, and the game is just sort of over.
Now, how should they have responded to that? That's another conversation. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes.
So that's the Panini suit.
Yeah. Now you got the Fanatics suit.
Yeah, that quickly came in. So break that down for us.
Yeah. So within a few days of Panini filing this lawsuit against Fanatics, Fanatics filed a countersuit against Panini. And what was interesting, Fanatics countersuit was huge.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is as part of the countersuit, they sued Panini for unfair competition. They also sued Panini for tortious interference, breach of obligations to negotiate, bad faith negotiations, claiming that Panini cost Fanatics missed opportunities in sales and actual money spent because of, bad faith negotiations, I think, around Panini or Fanatics acquiring Panini or getting Panini to end the licenses early.
Yeah.
That there was a lot of negotiations taking place around that for many months, and it never came to fruition. And now Fanatics is claiming that basically Panini was kind of acting in bad faith throughout that. And also interesting is Fanatics used their lawsuit to really just attack the heck out of Panini and defend themselves from Panini's allegations and just smear Panini in their lawsuit, which is interesting because that's not apparently always done. I'm not super familiar with, antitrust suits, but apparently a lot of times the defendant, doesn't go on the attack like that. How Fanatics really went on the attack. And I mean, even the press communication that Fanatics put out, both in response to Panini's lawsuit and in response to their own lawsuit being filed, Fanatics was just on the warpath with all of this.
I do wonder, they mentioned that they've sort of been threatened by this looming lawsuit for a while now. I wonder if that sort of hurt Panini, because this was clearly a very professional, put together lawsuit. They're pulling out tweets, just from hobbyists after Panini filed their lawsuit, dunking on Panini. They're putting those in the lawsuits. I wonder if this run up to this gave Fanatics a ton of time to prepare this, and they had just been sitting on it, and quick turnaround. They immediately go on the offensive. It sort of feels like there was a ticking time bomb here that Panini was holding, and now it just went off when they didn't expect it to.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I don't know. There was a lot of stuff Fanatics alleged. There are a lot of juicy things. I mean, Fanatics said Panini had been out to sabotage them through illegal means. He had bad faith negotiations, falsified numbers, suing former employees, which we knew about.
Yeah.
Panini was somehow delaying Fanatics' ability to do athlete deals. And then and as part of them really going on the attack, like they said, Panini has a dismal record of customer service, a horrible rating with a Better Business Bureau, enormous unfilled redemptions, poor quality control. I can attest to a lot of that. Yeah. I got a whole bunch of unfilled redemptions from a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Panini's customer service ain't great. There has been a lot of quality control issues with their products. Topps, though, also has a lot of quality control issues as well. And, that's a hard job, I think, to print the number of cards that are printed. But
absolutely.
Some of Panini's have been higher profile quality control issues.
Yeah.
So it's the aggressiveness is interesting. Clearly, Fanatics is on the warpath here. Clearly, Fanatics is not going to step down. And I think Fanatics is pissed at Panini, just as Panini's pissed at Fanatics. I think these are now two companies that really do not like each other. And unfortunately, collectors may be in the crossfire as a result of that. And, this will, eventually, I guess we'll eventually get to, it's late 2025 that the NBA license will transfer from Panini to Fanatics and Topps. And it's early 2026 that the NFL license will transfer from Panini to Fanatics and Topps. So we're what, 2.5 years out, or so from both of them transferring.
Yeah.
This is an important 2.5 years for the hobby. I mean, the hobby's, we're trying to grow the hobby right now. There's still a lot of consumer interest. I don't want to see I hate to have to wait 2.5 years to have, Fanatics in control and some closure to this whole thing, but it may not even be closure because the antitrust lawsuit could still be going on in 2.5 years. And then there could still be some uncertainty hanging around. And you don't know, like if the judge somehow sides with Panini to some extent here, which I'd be a little surprised, but anything's possible, then maybe the judge, puts an injunction on the licenses transferring or something happens that further delays some of this, or who knows. The uncertainty is not a good thing for the hobby.
No, it's gotten really messy really quickly. Again, I sort of feel for Panini to a certain extent, but objectively as a collector, I think a lot of us are frustrated with this battle over the licensing and these companies going out, getting the exclusives for individual players. And like you mentioned, this is going to be a really important time for the hobby. We're hopefully going to be, 2xing or 3xing during this period of time. And we're really not sure what Wemby's cards are going to look like, right? He's going to be in Spurs uniforms for Panini products, but Topps owns the autograph licenses. So this is a guy that's supposed to be one of the, the best NBA prospects since LeBron.
Yeah.
And his key cards, his key license cards aren't going to have autographs.
That is my exact point.
If you're a new collector coming into the space, how are you going to feel about that?
It's not good. It's not good. And it's not good that Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and who else? I think Will Levis. None of this has been officially announced yet, but it was part of, it was referred to in the lawsuit. So it's obviously happening that, but it's both ways. I mean, it's Fanatics has been signing some of these, folks exclusively to kind of poke at Panini, but then I think Panini just did the same with Arch Manning. They did the big card release and said Arch Manning signed an autograph deal with Panini. And so, I mean, I'm assuming Arch Manning will not have a Bowman U Superfractor auto. I'm assuming he won't. Whereas all the other top quarterbacks are going to have a Bowman U Superfractor auto, because I assume that Arch Manning now cannot be in, the Topps products with a, maybe at all, I don't know, but at least an autograph. It's possible that he won't be in there at all, because if it was an NIL deal. So if it's an exclusive NIL deal, then regarding his entire name, image, and likeness, then Arch Manning may be completely absent from the Bowman U products that Topps produces over the next few years.
I think a lot of people were sort of hoping that, even though it's an unfortunate scenario, Panini would sort of bow out gracefully.
Yeah.
You can understand them fighting back
to
try to get as much as they can while they can. But collectors, I think we can objectively say collectors are being hurt sort of in this crossfire. You don't have to be Team Panini or Team Fanatics, but we can objectively say that all of the collectors in the middle here are getting hurt no matter what.
The best thing that could have happened by far was Panini and Fanatics reaching an agreement. Fanatics taking either acquiring all of Panini or acquiring the particular brands and sets, or at a minimum paying off Panini to transfer the licenses earlier, which was apparently the lawsuit. One of the lawsuits also referenced that was a possibility as well, that they had been in negotiation around that fact. Any of those things would have been way better than where we are today, which is now these companies are at war with each other. It's not good. Topps, so the same day back in, I think it was August of 2021, 2 years ago exactly, where the news broke that Fanatics got these licenses, Topps was every bit as surprised as Panini. Topps found out through the media, just like Panini found out through the media.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Topps in many ways, Topps was in a worse position, because for a couple of different reasons. First of all, I think I don't think they had quite as long left on their baseball license. I think their deal, I think with the MLBPA, it was expiring within 2 years or something. But second of all, Topps was on the verge of going public. It was, or the whole SPAC thing, whole, whatever, I forget the exact specifics of that, but remember there was this massive, or maybe they were going from public to private. I can't remember exactly.
I think they were going public.
Yeah.
With a massive valuation.
Yeah.
And then that sort of crumbled as soon as they lost the license.
Yeah, exactly. There was a huge financial event that was right on the verge of happening. This massive financial event for Topps, where they were going to have a massive valuation, and that literally pulled the rug out from underneath that financial event.
Yep.
And chopped their valuation off at the knees, just murdered their valuation.
Yeah, wasn't it
literally overnight?
It was like $1 billion valuation.
Yeah, I think it was a multi-billion.
Yeah,
I want to say I can't remember, but I want to say it was a multi-billion-dollar valuation.
And then they sell for what, 500 million?
Yep. Yeah, their card business. They also had the candy business, which I guess was worth something good too. But yeah, I mean, absolutely murdered their valuation, and so Topps had all the reason to be even more angry and upset than Panini. Yet the angle that Topps took, I mean, I wasn't involved in any of the conversations or negotiations, but from the outside, it appears that Topps got over the anger and said, okay, that sucks, but we're here now. The circumstances have been dealt to us. So how do we make the most of our circumstances? And Topps apparently decided, well, we need to try to sell to Fanatics as soon as possible and get the best deal as possible. And
Right.
Topps probably realized that every day, every week that went by where they had not yet sold to Fanatics, their value was decreasing. And they probably, for a couple of different reasons. First of all, because they were going to get towards the end of the licenses, which would mean that they were less valuable and less useful. Second of all, the longer they would wait, the more likely Fanatics would be to just try to build up their own internal resources, as opposed to as opposed to, acquiring Topps and utilizing their resources. So then Topps would become less valuable. And then the third thing is that every week that went by, there was a greater and greater chance that maybe Fanatics would acquire Panini. And if they did, then Topps would be less valuable. So Topps said, we got to get a deal done, and we got to get a deal done relatively soon. Yeah. And it took a few months, but a deal got done. I think it was 5 months. I think it was from August of 2021 until January 2022 is when the deal with Topps was announced. Yeah. They got a deal done for $500 million. It probably wasn't the numbers that Topps wanted, but it was certainly better than zero. It was certainly better than what they were facing potentially happening to their card business within a few years. And so, they got that done, and Panini didn't. For whatever reason, Panini didn't. And there were a lot of conversations, there were a lot of negotiations, but it never got past the finish line. There were points in time when I understand it was like this close to the finish line. Like the deal between Panini and Fanatics, like literally at the 11th hour fell apart. I don't know exactly why. Fanatics is now alleging that, Panini falsified numbers. So that very well could have been it. Like 11th hour due diligence. Yeah. Fanatics auditors are in there looking at everything Panini's doing, and Fanatics auditors are determining that some of the numbers aren't adding up. That's a real easy way to kill a deal at the 11th hour. So that might have been what happened. But whatever it was, Panini couldn't get the deal over the finish line, and to this day seems to be harboring a tremendous amount of anger towards Fanatics. Topps bit their tongue, swallowed their pride, and said, what's the best possible outcome for us given the current circumstances? And they said, we got to figure this out with Fanatics. And they got a deal done with Fanatics. And it created, by the way, that while that might not have been the best financial event for the people with a vested interest in Topps, the shareholders, the owners, compared to maybe what they would have had before that had happened, what it did do was it created tremendous opportunity for Topps employees, because many of Topps employees today, most or all of Topps employees were retained. And I know that, like one of the heads of Topps was promoted now into being one of the heads of Fanatics, overseeing kind of the whole entire trading card operation. And a lot of the Topps people stayed around and now have more support, more importance, more than ever before at their disposal. And Fanatics has hired a ton of new people as well, but it gave opportunity to Topps that Panini has not gotten. And in fact, now Panini's losing employees over to Fanatics, left and right, because the future opportunities seem to be with Fanatics and Topps. So I don't know. There's like one thing that I've learned in business is that you can't focus on the past, and you can't bring emotion into it. You got to focus on the here and now. It doesn't matter if somebody kicked you yesterday and you're mad at them. What matters is, where are you today, and what is the best move you can make today for the future of your business? And from what I see, it appears to me that Topps said, okay, that sucked that Fanatics got all the licenses, but we're going to shake it off, bite our tongue, and the best move we can make today is to try to get a deal done with Fanatics as quickly as possible. Panini hasn't been able to get over the anger. It seems
emotional.
It's emotional. This lawsuit on both sides. Panini and Fanatics, it's very, very emotional. And emotion is not good in business. Right. Emotion is bad in business. It's a bad strategy to bring emotion into business, because it clouds your decision making, it clouds your judgment, and both sides seem emotional right now.
It seems like Topps accepted the inevitable very, very quickly. Panini has not accepted that. It's been an emotional decision. And then, like you mentioned with Topps, there's an expiration date on this. Panini's value for Fanatics is only going to decline. And I think from a collector standpoint, I think a lot of us would sort of like to see this process be, escalated, and we'd really like to see the velocity increase. But also, I think the hobby would lose as a whole if Panini doesn't get acquired, because I don't think anybody actually wants to see things like Optic go away.
Yeah, Prism I know. That would be such a damn shame.
I think that is getting lost a little bit here. I know Panini's frustrated and you don't want to sell, but if you truly care about the hobby, at some point you probably have to say, okay, these are some iconic brands. We need to get what we can get. You know, we've misplayed this a little bit. We got emotional. We now need to just accept the inevitable and let Fanatics take over a whole bunch of our brands. You know, keep this going. Prism, I don't even like Prism that much, but it doesn't have to die, and it's an iconic brand. And I think a lot of us reminisce about some of the old stuff, you know, like Fleer basketball and things like that. You know, Skybox hasn't been completely sunset, but you know, Skybox from 1996 and 1997 doesn't really exist anymore, and that is sad. I don't want to see that happening with some of Panini's iconic brands.
Yeah.
It's an unfortunate situation. It got misplayed. You know, Fanatics came in, pulled the rug out, but you have to accept reality at a certain point, and it would be better for collectors holistically to keep those brands in our space, right?
I totally agree. That is honest to God. Like I really like Panini's product designs more than Topps product designs. Like there are from Prism to Select to Obsidian. Like I really like Obsidian. National Treasures, Flawless. There are so many Panini products that I really like the design of. I mean, I even like Optic with the iconic, you know, rated rookie look on the Optic cards. And you know, even like, I'm not a fan of Mosaic, but even Mosaic's cool. Like there's cool elements to just about every Panini product, not to mention the inserts. Like I cannot imagine, especially coming off the National this year, watching like all of the kids at our kids trade zone on the show floor of the National. It was all downtown, Color Blast, kaboom. Downtown, Color Blast, kaboom, kaboom. Then maybe a little blank slate. Downtown, color blast, kaboom, blank slate. Like that's what all the kids wanted, was like they were it was all of those inserts, you know? And I can't imagine a world where all of those inserts just go away with football cards and basketball cards and those iconic sets, the rated rookie logo and Optic and Donruss and Prism and all that stuff, Flawless. I can't imagine a world where all of that goes away. And I'm just not as excited about Topps Chrome basketball and, you know, home field advantage inserts as I am about Prism basketball and downtown inserts. Like I'm just, you know, it's just not quite the same.
Yeah, it would be unfortunate, but just to sort of keep us forging forward, overall, what has been like the biggest takeaway from like an interesting fact standpoint? Like what have you been surprised by the most? You know, there's a bunch of little details that have popped up through both of these lawsuits that people didn't really know about before. What has been sort of the most interesting little nugget that you've seen so far?
Well, first of all, it confirmed a lot of rumors. I mean, there have been rumors and speculation for the last couple of years about the negotiations between Fanatics and Panini. It confirmed that those indeed were going on, that they were deep negotiations. And it surprised me to learn that they had been going on as extensively as they had up until even the last few months. Like there was still, you know, they were still trying to get deals done. And of course, you know, Fanatics was saying that Panini was doing it in bad faith, and who knows, but there was absolutely negotiations happening in a lot of different angles, whether it's, you know, Fanatics acquiring Panini or acquiring the brands or getting them to cut the licenses early. There was a lot happening behind the scenes. Things like Fanatics investing in Panini's printer. I mean, I'd heard rumors of that. That's now essentially confirmed. A lot of, you know, the exclusive autograph deals we had heard. That was the case, but that was mentioned in one of the lawsuits. And so it confirmed a lot of things that we had heard. And then there was some juicy stuff, like, you know, like the fact that in Fanatics lawsuit that they mentioned that Panini's CEO had negotiated for a job at Fanatics after all of this had happened. Panini's CEO had negotiated for a job at Fanatics and then turned around, according to Fanatics lawsuit, you know, I allegedly, right? Turned around and then used their negotiation with Fanatics to then get like a better, you know, payday at Panini.
Not nice.
I mean, that's kind of juicy. And, you know, apparently Panini's CEO tried to convince, you know, Panini's parent company over in Europe, Panini, you know, Italy, to try to Fanatics is the future. We should sell to Fanatics. And so it's just, there's little juicy things like that, which were kind of interesting to read. But at the end of the day, like, once again, I don't think that's just a lot of like, he said, he said, she said. That's just a lot of like poking at each other. At the end of the day, to me, the big question is, did Fanatics do anything illegal? Did they do something that was both completely anti-competitive and bad business? And as I said earlier, like the very first hurdle you got to jump over, in my opinion, is getting this 20-year license a anti-competitive monopolistic thing. And I don't see how you can possibly say it is when the person suing had the exclusive license for 15 years.
I think the interesting thing too is that, at least from my perspective, I'm interested on your take on this, but to be honest, Panini has had exclusive rights to these leagues for a long time, but regardless of whether or not you like that Fanatics is getting this stuff, they have shown more interest, in my opinion, than in the space than Panini has. Fanatics came in, for better or for worse, said, okay, live selling, breaking, kind of broken, let's revamp it with new products. Card shows, they kind of stink a lot of the time. They need a revamp. We're going to come in with Fanatics events and invest in this space. Card shops are a little wonky a lot of the time. Let's try to give some resources to these people to really beef up what they're doing in the brick and mortar setting. Did we see Panini doing any of that over the last decade?
No, I'm with you. Fanatics is putting in a much higher level of investment right now, a much higher level of investment than anything the hobby has ever seen before. You are 100% correct on that. I mean, on every aspect, like Fanatics is looking at every aspect of the hobby, from, as you said, card shows to marketplaces to breaking platforms to, how cards are distributed and how hobby shops are operating and keeping their own looks up to date. I mean, every aspect of the industry Fanatics is looking at, and they are spending a ton of money in hiring very smart, like well-background people to affect positive change in all of these areas. And they're also spending a ton of money on marketing,
That seems like low-hanging fruit,
that has
right?
never been spent before.
That seems insane.
From that perspective, I 100% agree. And I think ultimately the best outcome here is that this thing somehow settles out with Fanatics taking Panini or taking the brands and the licenses sooner rather than later, so that all of that money that Fanatics is already applying can be applied across all the sports.
So that's the next thing that we need to talk about is the resolution here. We've got multiple lawsuits that apparently can go on, simultaneously. We'll have to see what the judges say about that, but there will have to be a resolution at some point. What do you think is going to happen? And you've sort of hinted at what you hope is going to happen, but what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, and
official legal advice here.
Sure, right. So I mean, the easy answer is I don't know, but if I had to guess, I don't think we're going to get a resolution in the next several months, because now that the lawsuits have been filed, now some real money is going to start to be spent on legal bills. And I think probably we're going to get a little ways down the road legally, see how the judge's reaction is to motions these sides are going to be filing against each other.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some initial deposition through, initial discovery. So I think we're going to go down that path a bit. And then all of the lawyers will probably have a sense of who's winning the lawsuit. And then once you get to the who's winning the lawsuit point, then the negotiation maybe starts to shift. And it's if Panini is losing at that point, then maybe Panini becomes more willing to take a buyout or, take one of Fanatics' offers. Or if Panini's starting to feel stronger about their position as they start to go down the road a bit, then maybe Panini gets more aggressive. Maybe Fanatics blinks, and maybe Fanatics gets a little worried and says, okay, fine, we're going to give you quite a bit more than what we had previously offered just to get this done. So lawsuits can often force people to take. It can often force negotiation and can often force people to agree to something that they didn't think they would agree to today. But once they're a year into the lawsuit and they start to see their own standings start to maybe not be quite as good as they thought it was and start to erode, and they can start to see a little bit of writing on the wall, then they might be a little more willing to negotiate and get a deal done just to get it over with. So I wouldn't be, I hope it does drive to settlement. I doubt the settlement's going to be super soon. I'm guessing we got to get several months or a year or more down the road with a lawsuit, and then maybe one side's more willing to settle. But getting to settlement as quickly as possible, that is the best thing that could happen for the hobby. And gosh, I really hope we get there sooner rather than later. I don't know that we will, but I hope we do.
Yeah, it sort of feels like I'm curious what your thought is on what is the threshold where you think Fanatics just sort of pays to make this go away? Is there damage that Panini can do at a certain point where Fanatics is just like, okay, our image is going to be so damaged coming out of this, even if we win, we just need to stop this?
Oh, well, the worst possible scenario for Fanatics would be that if the judge or the jury agrees with Panini's argument that Fanatics is monopolistic and that locking up the licenses for 20 years violates antitrust laws. And if the judge tells the sports leagues, the license that you gave Fanatics is void, and you're not allowed to give anybody an exclusive license. You must have an open process for anybody who wants to obtain a license and pay some certain fee to do so.
Upper Deck just cheering in the
background. They must be able to obtain a license.
Yeah.
That is a possible outcome to this. I don't think it's the most likely outcome, but it's a possible outcome. It's a very possible outcome.
We can end off this, but is that the best outcome? What is legitimately the best outcome here?
I would say that is not the best outcome. I would say the best outcome is to get these licenses in Fanatics' hands as quickly as possible. Because if that is the outcome, then I think Fanatics immediately decreases their spending. I think they immediately curb a lot of their plans.
Yeah.
Possibly even to the point where they rethink a lot of their investment and commitment to this market to begin with. Because if Fanatics is told your licenses with the leagues can no longer be exclusive, and Panini is permitted to continue to make trading cards, NFL, NBA, officially licensed trading cards forever into the future. And by the way, even Upper Deck can now, once again, make officially licensed NBA and NFL trading cards because the leagues have to have, some open process.
Yep. Upper Deck's coming in. Leaf probably comes in.
If Fanatics is told that, then I think Fanatics looks at this market much differently. I think Fanatics says, okay, the market potential that we thought was there is now chopped in half or by 2/3 because we're going to forever have these competitors. And I think Fanatics at that point probably significantly dials back their investment, which I think would actually be the worst possible outcome, because I think that I think that Fanatics investment is really compelling and important to the growth of sports cards. So I favor Fanatics having the exclusive licenses because they've already shown they're willing to invest at a level that is far, far beyond what Topps on their own or Panini or anybody else has ever invested at. And I want that investment to continue to come into the hobby because that's going to grow the hobby and strengthen the hobby. So I think any type of outcome that causes Fanatics to curb that investment will be a bad outcome for the future of the hobby.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, they've done, for better or for worse, whether or not you think they're a monopoly, taken over too much, they have invested more in the last 12 months from a financial standpoint. They have shown more interest in our space than any other manufacturer has done up until this point.
I totally agree. So I'm optimistic with the future with Fanatics, but man, I sure would like these folks to settle it out and figure out a way to be
sooner
friends
rather
again.
than later. Yeah.
All right, Ben, I appreciate you covering all this with me today.
Of course.
It's been fun, and I appreciate you guys out there watching. Curious to hear your comments on all of this in the comments. Of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave your comments on the YouTube comments. But don't forget, we also put the full length of these Geoff Wilson shows out on Spotify, as well as Apple Podcasts. So you can watch or listen to these shows on the go. And then we do short clips from these shows every week on social media on It's Geoff Wilson on Instagram and TikTok. So please follow along. We appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you soon in the next episode. Take care.